The other night, I was working on a service provider project and I decided to hop on a couple of websites as well as WordPress themes to draw inspirations for the client's project. And then I stumbled upon this demo template by Theme, and it really caught my attention with the background used down to its graphics. So today, I'll be recreating my own version of this site with slight modifications and a $0 budget, which means we'll be designing this entire site using a local host, local WP by Flywheel. Now, taking a quick look at this site, we can easily tell this is a single page website, and we've got the website heading with a sticky header effect and within our navigation menus, which helps us move across different sections of this site with just a click. Now, there are a couple of things I had to improvise from its original, especially the Mansory image gallery, which we'll be talking about within this video. We'll also be taking a look at how to create this using WP forms and also style its default look to give us this exact matching look. Alright then, let's get started. So here's my plan. I'll be downloading 3 Chrome extensions, the first 2 to help identify the fonts and colors used on this site, and the third to download the image and graphics, because that's what really make a website come alive. So let's get started. Starting with Fatkun batch download image to help download the image and graphics, what fonts to detect the font details, and lastly Colorzilla to help identify the color hex codes. For those of us that don't have this yet, I'll advise you to go ahead and download them right away, and be sure to pin them to the extension bar because you'll still need them in the future. The next step will be getting your website ready. Since we wouldn't be going through the traditional buy hosting and domain, I would save that for later since I intend making dedicated videos on that. Now let's move on to install and activate the theme and plugins required to achieve this. For the theme, any WordPress theme will do, but geared towards using Astra instead for this project. So head on to Appearance, Themes, Add New, and search for Astra. Install that and then activate. For the plugins, we'll be needing Elementor, QI add-ons for Elementor, sticky header effects for Elementor, and lastly WP forms. So hover over plugins, add new, and search for the plugins I just mentioned. Let's start with Elementor. Install that, and as soon as that starts installing, move over to search for QI add-ons for Elementor. Install that. Search for sticky header effects for Elementor, install, and lastly WP forms. Install and then activate that. And as soon as you activate WP forms, it's likely going to bring you to this page, but we'll be coming to that soon enough once we start designing this site. So let's head back to plugins to activate the plugins we installed earlier. Check all 3, bulk action, activate, and apply. So the function of these plugins will be Elementor as the page builder, create a sticky header effect to the website header. WP Forms allows us create this website form for free, and lastly QI add-ons give us additional features to help us create this Mansory gallery with a lightbox effect, and also give us the functionality to style WP Forms to look like this. And that brings us to deactivating the set of widgets aside the Mansory image gallery and WP Forms style widgets on the QI add-ons plugin. To do this, let's head over to widgets, and I just need to search for these 2 specific widgets. And to do that without having to scroll down this page, I can just hit Ctrl F on my keyboard and search for Mansory image gallery. And I can do the same for the WP form style widgets. Since I wouldn't be needing the rest right now, I can just deactivate them, leaving just these 2 activated. And when I need any additional widgets, I can just come back to toggle that on. Once they're all deactivated, hit save. And now we are ready to begin with designing this site. But just before we create this page, first let's add this background effect to the body of this site. That's this somewhat wooden background. So hover over Appearance, select Customize, and from here click on Additional CSS. I'll be pasting this code into this field, and the link to this you can find in the description. And within this bracket, in between these quotes, we need to specify the URL of the image we want this background to be. Which brings us to using the aid of the first extension I mentioned to help download the files on this site. So I'll click on this and select Download on Current tab, which should take us to a new tab, and this will be the image we want to use for the background. So I'll select this icon to download the image, head back to my website backend, hover over Media, select Add New, and let's upload that particular image we just downloaded. Click on Copy URL to Clipboard, head back to the CSS field, and paste the URL we just copied in between these quotes. And once that reflects, hit the Publish button. And now we can move on to adding a page to the site. Title and publish this. Next, I want to condition this as my home page. So I'll hover over settings, select readings, change this to static page, and select the home page as the page I just created, and save changes. Now let's head back to the page I just created and hit edit with Elementor. And with this, I can begin with my design. But first, let's identify the fonts used on this site as well as the colors so we can create global fonts and colors without having to go back and forth with them. Since I've already gone through this site, I'll just save you the stress. So the two fonts used on this site are Roboto Slab and Railway. But of course, let's test this extension out. And by clicking on any text or heading, we can see the properties of this font as well as its colors. And since all colors here are the same, and that would be hashtag 2E1F14. So let's head back to our design canvas to begin adding the global fonts. Click on the hamburger icon, select site settings, and click on global colors. So for the primary color, I'll select this box icon and paste the color code that was copied to the clipboard, which is hashtag 2E1F14. Since this is the only color I need, I can just leave the rest as is, head back and select global fonts. The primary font will be Roboto Slab, and the secondary font will be Railway. Once all is set and done, hit update. And now I just need to get rid of the header and footer. To do this, let's select this page settings, and for the page layout, change this to Elementor Canvas. And now we can begin designing this page. And this will be the recreated version of the original. So essentially this will be my design reference. Okay, so starting out with this section, I'm just going to head back to my design canvas and then click on this plus icon. And for the structure type, we want to go with just one column. Now let's head on to the content width, and we want this to be boxed. So relatively everything here has a box layout. Heading back to my design canvas, we want to leave this to boxed, and for the width, we want to make this 960. So we'd have everything set to this column. So I'm just going to head on to advanced, and just as we have here, we have a little spacing to the top and also spacing to the bottom. Alright, heading back to my design canvas, I'm just going to unlink all values for the margin, and for the top, we want to make this 10, and for its bottom, we want to make this 50 pixels. Okay, so once we've done that, let's head on to making customizations to the column. So I'm just going to click on this column and head on to style. Essentially what we want to do now is to add in this border around our content. So I'm just going to head on to our design canvas, select the borders tab, and for the border type, we want to change this to solid, and for its width, we want to make this 4. Okay, and for its color, I want to click on this and change this to the primary color which we set earlier on. And for its border radius, we want to make this 0. Now the next thing we want to do will be adding paddings all around our column. So I'm just going to head on to advanced, and for its padding, we want to make this 25 pixels. And by the time we're adding a content into this column, that is where everything we've made customizations to would appear. So let's head on to widget and drag in an inner section into this column. The next thing we want to do will be adding a height to this inner section. So I'm just going to come down to height and then change this to min height. And for its minimum height, we want to make this 500. So we want just one column for our inner section. So I'm just going to delete one of this. And now we can start out adding in our elements. So heading back to our design canvas, what we have here will be a background image and then an image on top. So heading back to our design canvas, I'm just going to click on this column for our inner section, head on to style. And for the background type, select classic and then choose an image. So this will be the image we want to go for. So I'm just going to click on insert media and that should automatically appear. So for its position, we want to make this center. For its attachment, default to no repeat. And for its size, we want to make this cover. Okay, so that's pretty much all we need to do for this column. So I'm just going to head on to widgets and then drag in an image into this column and then choose an image. So what we have here will be, I'm a carpenter, I make things out of wood. Okay, so heading back here, I'm just going to click on this and then click on insert media. And as we can see, we have this aligned to the top as opposed to what we have here, which is center aligned. So I'm just going to head back to our design canvas and I can either click on this column, head on to layout, and for the vertical alignment, I can change this to middle, or I could still click on this, and for its vertical alignment, I can just change this to middle. Now the next thing we have here will be a divider. So let's quickly get that done. So I'm just going to head on to widgets, and I'm just going to drag this directly underneath our inner section. And for its style, we want to leave this set to solid, and for its width, we want this set to 100%. So I'm just going to leave that as is. And for the alignment, we want to center align this. And if you wanted to add additional elements to this divider, you can just click on text and then add in your text in here. And if you wanted to add an icon, you can just click on this and then choose an icon, and that's automatically going to appear there. So let's click on this and click on insert. And if you wanted to get rid of that, you can just click on none. Now let's move on to styling this divider. So I'm just going to head on to style, and for its color, we want to make sure to choose our primary color, which we selected earlier. And for its width, we want to make this 4. And for its gap, we want to make this 20. So I'm just going to make that 20. Okay, so heading back to our design reference, what we have here next will be a text. So I'm just going to copy this, head back to our design canvas, and then head back to widgets. So I'm just going to drag in a heading directly underneath our divider, and I'm just going to paste that in here as a plain text. Now heading back to our design reference, we have a break in between this and this. So let's head back to our design canvas, and in here you want to put in a less than, greater than, and in between them you want to put in a BR. Okay, and we should have that break in there. In here we want to add in another break, so I'm just going to search for that, put in less than, greater than, and then put in a BR in between. Okay, now if you wanted to add in a link, you can add that in here. For each size, we want to leave this to default, and for the HTML tag, we want to leave this to H2. For its alignment, we want to center align this, and then we can move on to styling our text. And for its text color, I'm just going to click on this and set this to primary. For the typography, click on this and make sure this is set to primary. So I want to make sure this is set to Roboto Slab. And for its size, we want to make this 30 pixels. And for its weight, we want to leave this set to 600. And for the line height, we want to make this 40. Okay, so once we've done that, the next item we'll have here will be image boxes. So heading back to our design canvas, I'm just going to click on widget, and I would search for image box. But first, we would have to add in an inner section. So we'll have 4 columns where we can add in our image box. So I'm just going to remove this, and I'm just going to drag this directly underneath our heading. So head back to widgets and search for image box. I'm just going to drag one of that into this column. And once we've made customizations to this, we can then duplicate one of this column into 3 more columns. So starting out with this, I'm just going to click on choose image. And what we have here will be a measurement ruler. So we could actually head on to icons8.com to search for icons. Now, because I'm having problems with my network at the moment, that is why I actually had to switch up to a local host. But you can head on to icons8, and let's say I wanted to search for a ruler. So if I click on this, now I don't know when this is going to respond. Like I said, I'm having problems with my network at the moment. But if you wanted to, you can actually come here to get icons for free. So heading back to my design canvas, the first image we have here will be this ruler within a circle. I'm just going to click on insert media, and that's automatically going to reflect. What we want to do will be getting rid of the description, and I'm just going to head back to my design reference, and I'm just going to copy this, head back to my design canvas, and then paste that in there. Okay, now if you wanted to add in a link, you can just do that in there. And for the image position, we want to leave this set to the top. If you wanted to, you can set this to the left, but let's just leave this set to the top. Now for its HTML tag, we want to leave this set to H3, and let's head on to styling this image box. So for its spacing, that is the spacing between the icons and the text, we want to make this 20. And for the image width, we want to make this 60%. Now that's not going to make more difference, but by the time we duplicate this column, that's actually going to make more sense with what we just did. Now, pretty much everything here we can leave to default, but if you wanted to, you can still make customizations to them. So I'm just going to head on to the Contents tab. So for its alignment, we want to center align this, and for the vertical alignment, we want to leave this to the top. Now for the title, we want to leave this spacing to default, and for its color, we want to make sure this is set to primary, and for the typography, we want to make sure this is set to primary. And for its font size, we want to make this 18 pixels, and for its font weight, we want to make this 500. Okay, so that's pretty much all we need to do for the image box, and all I need to do now is to duplicate this into 3 more sections. So I'm just going to right click on this and select duplicate. So all I need to do now is to delete one of this column. And now we can start out adding in our variations. So I'm just going to come back to our design canvas, and the first thing we'll have here will be this chainsaw. So let's head back, click on this. Select that and click on insert media, head back to this design canvas, and then copy this. And I'm just going to paste that in there as a plain text. Now I'm just going to quickly make customizations to the rest to save your time. Now the next thing we want to do will be adding in a little bit of margin to the top and bottom of this inner section. So I'm just going to click on this. So if we head back to our design canvas, you can see we have a little bit of space into the top as compared to what we have here. So I'm just going to click on this, head on to advanced, unlink all values for the margin, and for the top, we want to make this 20 pixels, and for its bottom, we want to make this 40 pixels. And that brings us to the next section, about me. So let's head back to our design canvas. And I'm just going to copy this divider and then paste that directly underneath this inner section. So I'm just going to copy this and then paste that in there. And this time, instead of having an icon, we want to change this to text. And all I need to do is to change this to about me. And once that reflects, we just need to make customizations to the text since we've already done the necessary customizations to the divider. So I'm just going to head on to style, select the text tab, and for its color, we want to change this to primary. Typography will be Roboto Slab. Click on this pencil icon, and for its size, we want to make this 25 pixels. And for the font weight, we want to make this 700. And for the spacing in between our text, we want to make this 20. So heading back to our design canvas, we have the image of the carpenter, we have a few words about me, and then we have this particular element. And for us to do that, we'd have to add in an inner section for us to be able to replicate that. So I'm just going to drag an inner section directly underneath this divider. And for the first column, we just need to click on that. And for its column weight, we want to make this 40%. And the second column will be left to 60. So let's move on to adding in an image into this column. So I'm just going to head on to widget and drag in an image directly into this column. Okay, let's scroll down this page and I'm just going to choose an image. Click on this and then select insert media. And that's automatically going to reflect. So let's head back to widget and drag in a heading into this column. For this element, we want to make sure this is vertically aligned to the middle. So I'm just going to click on this column, head on to vertical alignment, and then change this to the middle. So heading back to our design reference, I'm just going to copy this, head back to our design canvas, and then change this text to what we have there. So I'm just going to paste that as a plain text. For its size default, HTML tag H2, and want to align this to the left. Head on to style, and for its text color, I want to make sure this is set to primary. For the typography, we want to have this set to primary, and for its size, we want to make this 30 pixels, and for its weight, we want to make this 700. Now the next thing we want to do will be adding in an image box to represent this element in here. So I'm just going to head back to our design canvas, click on widget, and then search for an image box. Drag this directly underneath our heading. And I want to move on to choose an image. So this will be the image we want to go for, and then click on insert media. And that's automatically going to reflect in there. So the next item we'll have here will be description. So I just need to copy all of this. Head back to our design canvas, get rid of the heading, and we want to paste the description we just copied into this box. For each image position, we want to position this to the left. Now let's move on to styling this. So for the image spacing, we want to leave this set to 15. And for the image width, we want to make this 50%. We don't necessarily have to make any customization here. So I'm just going to head on to the content tab. And for the alignment, we want to make sure this is center aligned. And for the vertical alignment, we can change this to the middle. And since we don't have any title here, I'm just going to leave all of this set to default. So let's move on to the description. And for its color, we want to make sure this is set to primary. And for the typography, I'm just going to click on this and make sure this is set to railway. So that will be the secondary text. And for its size, we want to make this 14 pixels. And for its weight, we want to leave this set to 400. And for the line height, we want to make this 30 pixels. So that's pretty much all we need to do for this section. So I'm just going to head back to our widget, drag in an inner section directly underneath this. And now we can start out adding in this text, beginning with a heading. So heading back to our design canvas, I'm just going to head on to widget and drag in a heading into the first column. So we'll start out with the first column and then duplicate this to have 3 more columns. Let's start out with this, paste that as a plain text. For its size, leave this to default HTML tag to H2. And for its alignment, we want to align this to the left. Now let's head on to styling this. For the text color, we want to make sure this is set to primary. And for the typography, we want to make sure this is set to primary, which will be Roboto Slab. And for its font size, we want to make this 18 pixels. Font weight, we want to make this 400. Heading back to our design reference, I'm just going to copy all of this. Head back to my design canvas, click on widgets. And I'm just going to drag the text editor directly underneath the heading. Highlight all of this and then paste that as a plain text. Now let's move on to styling our text editor. For its alignment, we want to align this to the left. And for the text color, we want to make sure this is set to primary. Typography, we want to make this secondary, so that will be railway. For its font size, we want to make this 14 pixels. Font weight, we want to leave this set to 400. And for the line height, we want to make this 25 pixels. And that's pretty much all we need to do for this section. So all I need to do now is to duplicate this 2 more times. So I'm just going to duplicate that and get rid of the 4th column. So all we need to do now is to add in our text. So I'm just going to do that real quick. Now, once we have all our text in there, I want to make one last customization to these columns before I move on to the next section. So I'm just going to click on this. So essentially what I want to do will be adding in a padding to our columns. So I'm just going to head back to our design canvas, have this selected, head on to advanced. And for its padding, we want to make this 20 pixels around. All right, so once I have that in there, I can just copy this and paste the style we just made customizations to. Head on to the 3rd column and then paste that style. And automatically the paddings we added to the 1st column will be applied to the rest. Okay, so heading back to our design canvas, we'll have a divider concluding this section. So I'm just going to head back to my design canvas and then copy this divider and paste that directly underneath this inner section, which concludes the About Me section. And that brings us to my favorite part of this design. Now if we head back to Btheme, we can see we have these sections, and when we click on this, we can see the lightbox effect. Because I couldn't find something that could actually do this, I had to improvise using QI add-ons for Elementor to create my own version of that. And I think this looks much better, but then it's just my preference. So for you to actually get images like this, you can just head on to the website on splash.com. I don't know if that's going to load up because of my network. Okay. And you can just search for woodwork. Okay, so because of the fact that my network is actually messing up, I would just leave that to you. But I'm sure you can find the images from this search phrase. Now heading back to our design canvas, I'm just going to head on to widget. We could just search for image. And for our search, we should definitely see the Mansouri image gallery. So all I need to do is drag this directly underneath the divider. And if you wanted to, you can add a custom class where you can make further customizations to that. We're not going to be needing that. So I'm just going to move on to adding an item. So each of these images are single items. So heading back to our design canvas, I'm just going to choose an image, and this will be the image we want to go for. And all I need to do is to click on insert, and that's automatically going to reflect here. But if we take a look at this, we can see we have this set to a portrait mode. So heading back to my design canvas, for each image size, click on this. And by default, you should have this set to square, even if that's not selected just yet. We want to change this to portrait, and automatically that's going to reflect in a portrait mode. Now let's move on to adding in the rest of these items. So I'm just going to head on to our design canvas, click on this, select this, and then click on Insert Media. Add another item, choose an image, and this time I want to go with this. So I'm just going to click on Insert Media, and to save time, I'm just going to duplicate this. By default, this is going to be set to square. So if you wanted to, you can change one of these to a landscape mode, and let's see how that looks. But for the sake of this video, we're just going to stick with squares. Okay, so that's pretty much all we need to do for adding in our items. Now let's move on to the gallery settings. And if you wanted to, you can actually add in custom links into each of your images. And if we head on to the general tab, if I open one of these items, you can see we have the option to add in a link. The only downside to this is when we click on this, that's not going to bring up the lightbox effect. Now, if I open up the gallery settings tab and then change this to no, and then select one of our image, we can see we have the lightbox effect. And automatically when the custom links are enabled, the lightbox effect goes away. Okay, so I'm just going to leave that set to no. And if you wanted to, you can still change that to no in here. And if you wanted to, you can still make customizations to the number of columns. So essentially we have 1, 2, 3. And if I change this to 4, we don't want that. So I'm just going to leave this set to 3. And if you wanted to, you can still change the custom responsiveness. I'm just going to leave this set to predefined. And for the space between the items, you can still add spacing, but I'm just going to leave this set to default. And I think pretty much everything here right out of the gate looks good. Now let's move on to the next section. But before we do that, let's copy this and then close out this particular section. Now heading back to our design reference, what we'll have here will be, are you interested? Leave me a message. So heading back to my design canvas, click on widget. I want to add in an inner section so we have control over the items that are being added into this section. So I'm just going to drag in an inner section directly underneath this. And now we can start out making customizations to this. But just before we do that, I'm just going to delete one of these columns. And for this column, we want to make a little bit of customizations to its padding. So all I need to do is to head on to advanced, unlink all values here. And for the padding to the top, we want to make this 20. And the padding to the bottom, make this 20. And for its right, we want to make this 100. And same goes for the left, make this 100. Okay, now we can start out adding in our text. So I'm just going to head on to widget, drag in a heading directly into this column, head back to my design reference, copy this, head back to my design canvas and paste that in there. Obviously, as you can see, we have a break in between. Are you interested? And leave me a message. So I'm just going to put that in there, less than, greater than, and then a BR in between. The link we can leave to default, size, default, HTML tag, H2. And for the alignment, we want to center align this. So let's move on to styling this. So for the text color, we want to make sure this is set to primary, typography, primary. For its size, we want to make this 28. And for its weight, we want to leave this set to 600. Now for its line height, we want to make this 40. Heading back to our design reference, the next item we'll have here will be a text editor. So I just need to copy this, head back to our design reference, click on widgets, and then drag in a text editor directly underneath this heading. Highlight all of this and then paste that as a plain text. Column gaps, we want to leave this to default and leave the columns gap to default. Head on to style. Alignment, we want to center align this. For the text color, click on this and change this to primary. For its typography, click on this and then change this to secondary, so that will be railway. For its font size, we want to make this 14 pixels. For the weight, we want to leave this set to 400, and for its line height, we want to make this 35 pixels. Now for this section, we'll have to head back to our website backend to create the contact form and then head back to style it using QI add-ons. So hover over WP Forms and select Add New. Once you're brought to this page, you can either start off creating a blank form or you could use one of the templates on here. For me, I will be selecting the simple contact form template just to give us a head start adding other fields. Now let's take a look at the design reference. We've got your name, email, subject, and message. So let's work on that real quick, starting with the name. And to do this, I just need to select each field to edit them, or I could add a new field from this tab with a drag and drop. And to delete it, click the trash icon and select OK. That aside, let's go ahead editing the first field. And since we want just one field in here, I can just change the format from first and last to simple. Change the label to your name. And lastly, make sure to toggle this to required. There will be no need for description, so let's select the advanced tab and change this from medium to large. Although we're going to condition this to a column width of 50%, we still want this to be set to large so it fills up for the extra space that might be in between both fields. Change the placeholder to your name. And the CSS class helps us to condition the field width to 50% in a single row. So select the show layout and pick a layout. I'll be going with 2 columns, and let's pick the column to the left. Also be sure to hide the labels because there'll be no need for them in this case. And that settles things for this field. Now let's repeat the same process for the email. So head on to the advanced tab, change this to large, placeholder to your email, hide label, and select the layout, but this time we'll be going with the second half of this column. Next, we've got the subject field. So add new fields, and I want to go with this single line text. Label this as subject and make this required. Head on to advanced, change the field size to large, placeholder to subject, and lastly, hide label. The rest I can leave as is. Make this message. Head on to advanced. This I can leave its field size set to minimum. Placeholder will be message. And lastly, hide label. Hit save. And now I can head back to my page to add this form. But just before we head back to our design canvas, it's important for you to know that we still have some settings to complete in this tab. And since we've explored these 2 tabs briefly, this will be the last you want to work with. So I recommend you watch other videos on this topic, and I might just make a video on that soon. However, I'll title this as new contact form and save that. Alright, once that is saved, let's head on to our design canvas and search for forms. And you should see 2 forms in here. The red will be that developed by QI add-ons and the other by WP Forms. But since we want to be able to style this to conform with what we have here, I'll be picking that of QI add-ons. After all, that's one of the reasons we installed it to begin with. And it will be unlikely the form we just set up would show up immediately. So hit update to save your changes and then refresh this page to load up the form. Once that loads up, likely the form loads up automatically. If not, you can just come over to choose the form you just created. And once we've made this come up on this page, let's start out styling this form. The developers tool won't be needed in this case unless you wanted to display this elsewhere on your site using the shortcode snippet. So let's head on to style. Okay, and because we didn't add labels to this form, I'm just going to skip past this tab and then head on to the input style. And essentially this tab controls our field. So I'm just going to click on this and change it from default to secondary. So that will be railway. And I'm just going to click on this and then change its font size to 15 pixels. And for its weight, we want to leave this set to 400. And for its input color, I want to click on this and then change this to primary. And for its input background color, which is currently white, I'm just going to click on this box icon and then drag the second line all the way to the beginning. And that's going to create a transparent background. And for its body type, I want to click on this and then change this to solid. And for its width, I want to make this 2 pixels all around. And for its color, I want to change this to primary. For the input background radius, I'm going to make this 0 because I don't want any border radius to that. Moving on, we'll have to skip past this checkbox style because we didn't add any checkbox to our fields. And the same goes for the radius style. Now, if we head back to our design reference, we can see we have send a message instead of submit. So I can just head back to the WP form settings, and in here where we have submit button text, we could change this from submit to send a message. And then click on save. And once that saves, I'm just going to head back to my design canvas, hit update, and then refresh this page. Scroll down this page and select the form. Head on to style and then select the buttons tab. And for its typography, I want to click on this and then change this to secondary. So that will be railway. Click on this pencil icon, and for its font size, I want to make this 14 pixels, and for its weight, I want to leave this set to 400. Okay, I'm just going to come out of that, and for the button color, click on this and then change this to primary. And for its background, I want to make this transparent as well, so I'm just going to click on this and then drag the second line all the way to the beginning. And once that is set, let's move on to its border color. So I'm just going to click on this and then change this to primary as well. And for its border type, I want to change this from default to solid. And for its border width, I want to make this 2 pixels around. For the border radius, I'm just going to make this 0. And if you wanted to, you can change its size to full width. I'm not going to be doing that, so I'm just going to change this to no. Moving on, let's head on to the spacing tab. And essentially what this helps us to do is to add in a little bit of spacing to our fields. So let's start out with the item spacing. That is the spacing between our fields. I'm just going to make this 20 pixels. I'll skip the label spacing because we didn't add labels to this form. So I'm just going to head on to the input padding. And essentially what this helps us do is to add in paddings to our fields. So for this, I'm going to make this 15 pixels around. And for the text area height, which is this particular item here, the message, I'm just going to make this 140. And for the buttons margin, we want to add in a little bit of spacing to the top. So I'm just going to link all values here and then make this 20 pixels to the top. And for the buttons padding, I'm going to leave that set to default. Now, the last thing we want to do in here is to head on to our global style. So essentially what this helps us do is to align this to the left, middle, or to its right. But for the sake of this video, we're going to stick to the center. And that brings us to the end of this section. But by all means, if you wanted to make further customizations to this, you can. So I'm just going to head back to our design reference. And what we have here will be another divider. So heading back to our design canvas, I'm just going to copy this and then paste that directly underneath this form. So heading back to our design reference, let's quickly get this done. So I'm just going to head back to our design canvas, select the widgets panel, and then drag in an inner section directly underneath our divider. And since we have 3 columns in there, I'm just going to duplicate one of this. Now let's head back to our widgets panel. And again, we want to search for the image box. So I'm just going to drag one of this into this column. So heading back to our design reference, we have an image, we have the call me, and then we have a phone number. So I'm just going to copy this, head back to our design canvas, paste that in there, head back to the design reference. I'm just going to copy this and then paste that into the descriptions tab. Let's pick an image, and this time we want to go with this and then click on insert media, and that should automatically appear. Now let's move on to styling this. And for the image spacing, we want to leave this set to 15. And for its width, we want to leave this set to 30%. So let's move on to the contents tab. But if you wanted to, you can still make customizations here. I'm just going to leave them as is. So let's head on to the contents tab. And for its alignment, we want to make sure this is center aligned. And for the vertical alignment, we want to leave this set to the top. For the title spacing, we want to make this 10. And for its color, click on this and then make sure this is set to primary. And for its typography, click on this and make sure this is set to primary. So that will be Roboto Slab. And for its font size, we want to make this 18 pixels. And for its weight, we want to change this from 600 to 500. Once we're done with the title, let's move on to the descriptions. So for the description color, click on this and then change this to primary. And for its typography, click on this and then change this to secondary. And its font size, we want to make that 14 pixels. And for its weight, we want to make this 500. Okay, so that's pretty much all we need to do for this particular section. So I'm just going to duplicate this 2 more times. And then drag the rest into each of their respective columns. Head back to our design reference and I'm just going to quickly get this done just to save time. Now for its image position, obviously we've already done the major customizations for this, so I'm just going to leave everything as is. And if we head back to our design reference, we can see we have another divider closing out this section. So I'm just going to come back here, copy this, and then paste the divider directly underneath this inner section to close that out. Now the next thing we'll have here will be our website footer. So I just need to copy this, head back to our design canvas, select the widgets panel, and then drag in a text editor directly underneath this. So I'm just going to come over here and then paste that as a plain text. Now if we head back to our design reference, we can see we have this underlined as well as WordPress. So I'm just going to head back, highlight this, and then select underline, and the same goes for WordPress. And if you wanted to add in links to that, you can just highlight that again and then select this particular icon and then put in your link in there. And once you've added that, you can just click on this to apply. Now let's move on to styling this. So I'm just going to head on to style, and for its alignment, we want to center align this. And for the text editor, change this to primary. Typography, we want to make sure this is set to secondary. Head on to changing its font size, which will be 14 pixels. And for its weight, we want to leave this set to 400. But if you wanted to, you can change this to 500. And that's much more visible. Okay, so that's pretty much all we need to do for this section. So I'm just going to hit update. And that brings us to designing the website header. Starting out with adding in a new section directly on top of our website body. So I'm just going to head back to our design canvas, scroll all the way to the top, and then add in a new section directly on top of this. And we want to click on this, and for its structure type, we want to go with just one column. And just as we did in here, we want to condition this section to a width of 960. So I'm just going to head on to width and then change this to 960. So essentially all we design will be in this column. And for its HTML tag, we want to change this from default to website header. And I'm just going to head on to style to apply a transparent background to this section. So for its background type, select classic, and for its color, click on this box icon and then make this transparent. And there's a reason for this, which I'll show you later on as we progress with this design. Now, just as we did for this inner column, adding in a border around our content, we want to do the same for our headers column. So I'm just going to click on this, head on to style, and then select the borders tab. Change this from none to solid. And for its width, we want to make this 4 all round. And its color, we want to click on default and then change this to primary. Body radius, we want to make this 0. Next, we want to add in a little bit of margin to the top. So if we head back to our design reference, we can see we have a little bit of spacing to the top. So I'm just going to head back to our design canvas, select advanced. And for its margin, unlink all values. And for its top, we want to make this 10 pixels. And for its padding, we want to get rid of any extra spacing to our columns. So I'm just going to make that 0. And now we can start out adding in our contents. So essentially what we have here will be an inner section in this column. So heading back to our design canvas, I'm just going to click on the widgets panel and drag an inner section into this column. And all the customizations we made to that column would now appear. So heading back to our design reference, we have 3 columns in here. So this would be the first, this would be the second, which contains our website logo, and then this would be the last. So I'm just going to head on to our design canvas and then duplicate one of this column in the inner section. And for the inner section's first column, I want to make this 40 pixels. Same goes for the third column. So I'm just going to select that and make this 40%. And the last would be set to 20. So this will be the column that contains our website logo. Okay, so let's start out adding in our website navigation into this column. So I'm just going to head on to widgets and search for icon list, and then drag this into the first column. And by the time we're done making customizations to this, we just need to duplicate that into this column. Okay, so I'm just going to delete this and get rid of the icon. And obviously you want to put in your website link in here. Okay, so heading back to our design reference, we have why me, my offer, and then about me. So heading back to our design canvas, I'm just going to start out with why me. Next, we want to duplicate this 2 more times and then changing our values. And we want to apply link inline. And for its layout, we want to change this from default to inline. And now we can move on to styling this. And for the spacing between our icon list, we want to make this 50. And for the alignment, we want to center align this. There will be no need adding dividers, so I'm just going to leave that as is. And since we didn't add icons to this, we'll just skip past that and then open up the text tab. And for its text color, click on this and then change this to primary. And we don't need any text indent, so I'm just going to leave that as is. And for its typography, click on this and then change this to primary. So that will be able to slab. And for its size, make this 18 pixels. And for its weight, I want to make this 500. And once I've done that, all I need to do now is to copy this and then paste that into the third column and then fill out this other text. So I'm just going to get that done real quick. Now, once we've done that, let's move on to adding in our website logo. So I'm just going to select widget and then drag in an image directly into this column. Okay, now let's click on this to choose an image, and I'm just going to select this and then click on insert media. And automatically that's going to reflect in there. And for its alignment, make sure to center align this. Now, if we take a look at this, we can see this isn't properly aligned to the middle. So I can just click on this inner section. But if you have troubles actually clicking on it, you can just come over to the navigation bar and select that. And for the vertical alignment, we want to change this from default to middle. And automatically that's going to make it look much better than how it was before. Now, one last thing I want to do will be adding in a sticky header effect to this website header. So if we head back to our design reference, we can see we have that sticky header effect. So let's quickly get that done. Select this entire section for the website header. Head on to advanced and want to open up the sticky header effects tab and then toggle this on. Now, by default, most things here actually look good, or else you want to make further customizations to them. The only option I want to toggle on here would be the background color. So let's toggle that on and change its color to #6Fs for F. And once we've done that, that's automatically going to apply this background color we have to our website sticky header effect. And that brings us to our website responsive mode. Now we'll be coming to this where we can actually click on that and then it takes us to a particular section. That will be the last thing we want to do before we round this video up. So let's head back to our design canvas and update this. So let's switch over to the responsive mode. Let's click on the laptop responsiveness. And from what I see, I don't necessarily have to make any customizations to this. We can see pretty much everything here looks good. And that brings us to our tablet responsiveness. So all I need to do is select that. Now for its tablet responsiveness, essentially what we want to do in here will be adding in a little bit of paddings to the left and right just to have this more centered to the middle. So all I need to do is click on the header, head on to the advanced tab and unlink all values here. And for the right, we want to make this 10 and same goes for the left, make this 10. And want to repeat the same for this section. So I'm just going to click on that, head on to advanced, unlink all values for the padding and make the left 10 and same goes for the right, make this 10. Now once we've done that, let's move on to reducing the spacing we have for our icon list. So I'm just going to click on this. And since we set this to 50%, we could just reduce that by half. I'm just going to make this 20 to see how that looks. But then we want this to be on a single line. So I'm just going to head on to text and select the typography. Instead of having this set to 18, we could just make this 16 and see how that looks. Okay, that looks much better. So all I need to do now is to copy this and paste the style to this icon list. Now the next thing I might probably want to do will be reducing the minimum height of this inner section to say 400. And since we set this to 500 earlier, we could just make this 400 and see how that looks. And now let's scroll down and see the things we can actually make customizations to. And let's start out with this. Select that and then head on to style to reduce the font size. And for its typography, click on this pencil icon. And right now we have this set to 30. So I'm just going to make this 25 and see how that looks. Okay, that looks much more better. And for its line height, I want to change this to pixels and want to increase this by a little. So we have this set to 40 right now. So I'm just going to make this 45. Now let's move on to this section. So I'm just going to click on this, and when we've made customizations to the first, we can just copy and paste the style to other box. So let's head on to style, and for its spacing we can leave this to 20, and for its width I want to change this from 60 to 100. And essentially why I did that was because these images are looking a little bit dull, so I just had to increase its width to make it a little bit more sharp. And that's pretty much all we need to do for the image tab. So let's head on to content and reduce this font size a little bit. So let's click on this. Currently we have this set to 18, so I'm just going to make that 16 pixels, and for its weight we can leave that set to 500. And that's pretty much all we need to do for that. So I'm just going to copy this and paste the style to the rest. Okay, I feel that looks much more better than how it was before. So let's move on to the next section, and let's just quickly reduce the font size of this. So I'm just going to select that, head on to style, select the text tab and select its typography. Currently we have this set to 25, so I'm just going to make this 20 and see how that looks. Okay, and let's move on to the next section. Okay, this looks pretty good to me, so I'm just going to leave that as is. But if you wanted to, you can actually change its layout from middle to the top. And for us to do that, we can just head on to style, open up the content tab, and in here for the vertical alignment we can change this from middle to the top. Okay, now let's move on to the next section, and essentially what I want to do here would be reducing the paddings we added earlier on to each columns. So I'm just going to click on the first column, head on to advanced, and for its padding we currently have this set to 20. I would just make this 10 all around, and I can just copy this and paste that to the rest. Let's scroll down and see if we have any customizations to make here. I'm just going to leave this as is. And the last thing I might want to do here will be reducing the paddings we conditioned earlier on to this inner section. So let's click on this, head on to advanced. And currently we have this set to 20 pixels to the top and bottom and 100 pixels set to the left and right. So let's reduce their values by half. I just need to unlink all values here, and for the top I can make this 10, and for the bottom make this 10 as well. And for its right, instead of having that to 100, we can make this 50, and to the left make this 50 as well. So that's pretty much all we need to do for the tablet responsiveness. And if I scroll down this page, we can see pretty much everything here looks good. And let's scroll all the way to the top to see if we have any customizations to make here. Now let's move on to the mobile responsiveness. Now for the mobile responsiveness, just as we did for the tablet responsiveness, we want to make a little bit of customizations to the padding left and right. So let's start out with the website heading, and under the advanced tab, we want to unlink all values here, and for its left we want to make this 5, and for the right we want to make this 5 as well. And I'm just going to repeat the same for the website body. Unlink all values here, and for the left make this 5, and to the right make this 5. Now the next thing we want to do in here will be getting rid of the spacing to the left and the right of this inner section. So I'm just going to select this, head on to advanced, and currently we have this set to a padding of 25 pixels. So I'm just going to make this 10 instead. Now once we've done that, let's move on to reducing the minimum height of this inner section. So I'm just going to select this, and for the mobile responsiveness we want to make this 300. And for this heading, let's reduce its size. So I'm just going to click on this pencil icon, and instead of having this set to 25, we can make this 13. And for its line height, let's reduce this by 10. So I want to change this from 45 to 35. Moving on, let's reduce the column width of these sections to 50-50%. So I'm just going to select the first one. And instead of having this set to 100%, I can just make this 50. Okay, copy this and paste the style to the rest. But if we take a look at this, we can see the images are looking pretty big, and unlike what we did for the tablet responsiveness to make this sharp, let's just reduce its image width to say 80%. So I'm just going to select that, and instead of having this set to 100, we can make this 80. And lastly, for the image box widget, let's head on to the Contents tab to reduce its font size by a little. And for its typography, click on this pencil icon, and instead of having this set to 16, we could make this 14 pixels instead. And all I need to do now is to copy this and paste this to the rest. Okay, that looks much better. And for this section, I want to reduce the font size here to something a little bit smaller. So select that, head on to Style, and for its typography, click on this. And instead of having this set to 30, we could make this 28, or let's just say 25, and see how that looks. Okay, that looks much better. Well, we could still reduce this by a little. So let's make this 22, and I can just align this to the center. And the same goes for this, so I can just click on it, head on to Content, and for its alignment, I can just center align this. Now let's scroll down to see if we have any further customizations we can make to the rest. Now for these sections, we can actually leave this as is, but if you wanted to, you can still align this to the center. So let's align that to the center, copy this, and then paste that style to the rest. Moving on, I can just leave this section as is. And this section definitely want to make customizations too. So I want to click on this column, and instead of having this to what it is currently, I can just make this 10 pixels around, and that looks much better. And for its heading, let's reduce its font size. So I'm just going to head on to Style, its typography, click on this, and then make this 22 instead of 28. Okay, so that looks much better. Scroll down. If you wanted to, you can leave this as is. But let's try out something real quick. So I can just click on this column, and instead of having this set to 100%, I can make this 50. And let's just copy this and paste that style to the second column. And this is pretty much how it's going to look like after you've done that. Now, speaking of the site navigation for mobile, instead of having to leave it like so, I would rather hide this icon list and install the plugin Header and Footer Builder by ThemeForest to have the navigation menu added to the widgets panel, and then add that up to the header. And that brings us to adding in the navigation links. And because this is a single page website, we want to be able to click on a navigation menu to take us to specific sections of the site. So we could either use menu anchors, or we could assign class IDs to specific widgets to achieve this. For this video, we'll be assigning class IDs to the dividers, as they are more like start and end points to each sections. So let's use the Works and Contact Me navigation menu for this example. Let's scroll down to the Works section, select this divider, head on to the Advanced tab, and under the CSS ID, I want to add in Works as the CSS ID. Now if we head back to the navigation menu, open up the item for Works and put in hashtag Works. We've just successfully linked this menu to that divider we assigned an ID to. And now if I click on this, that should take us to the Works section. And the same applies for the Contact section. Click on this divider, head on to the Advanced tab, and add in Contact in the CSS ID field. Head back to the navigation menu and add that item with the hashtag. Select this, and that should bring us to the Contact section. And you want to repeat the same for other navigation menus. And with that done, I believe we've rounded things up for this video. I would appreciate it if you give this video a like, and be sure to subscribe for more. Thanks for sticking to the end, and I'll see you in the next one.